So I'm just bringing in Falcon, and I don't really have a strategy in my head. I'm just gonna play normal Invisible Woman style, basically. All right. Oh, this. Oh, wait. This is gonna take forever because she has the shield, and we don't do any damage without incinerate. Oh, you know what? Something is happening here that is very funny that I didn't think of. That is really bad. Chat. If you are catching on to what I'm saying is happening here and why I was just doing no damage, it's another exhibit A of why Falcon annoys me so much. In November 2020, Falcon and Gambit received champ reworks in Marvel Contest of Champions. Both characters, released in 2016, were fan favorites from the comics and cinema, yet their original designs fell flat upon release, and they never caught on as usable champs. Since the fall of 2020, starting with the now famous buffs to Magneto and Magneto House of X, Kabam has been steadily working through its list of outdated characters to give them value only or moderate updates, or in some cases, completely new kits. This has been an improvement since the original rework or buff program was erratic at best in terms of its champ release schedule. Historically, the full reworks sometimes end up being amazing. Look at Magneto and earlier Venom. But in my opinion, a good moderate update is sometimes the absolute best when you take a character with a good core ability that just needs a more practical playstyle or more damage. Well, Falcon's buff didn't disappoint. It took a little bit for him to gain some momentum, but within a couple months of his update, prominent YouTubers including Kingslayer MCOC and Barrowman were putting together videos of all the possible ways Falcon can shut down game mechanics with his defensive ability accuracy reduction. The list of the abilities he could counter was immense. In February of 2021, Legacy became one of the first big time YouTubers to publicly acknowledge Falcon's power by taking him to rank 3. To this day, Falcon is a mainstay on Legacy's war teams in Tier 1 Masters level Alliance War. Generally speaking, I believe in the hype train behind this champ as well. In May of 2021, the new 6-star arenas came out, and Falcon was the first basic champ in the arena. I put up over 90 million points to secure this character's dupe and immediately took my then Sig 1 Falcon to rank 3. Less than a month after I ranked my Falcon, the Grandmaster's Gauntlet, a temporary piece of endgame content featuring several stacked bosses, came out. My first look at the map, I saw a Spider-Gwen and a Nightcrawler that I thought Falcon would be perfect for. But when I took a closer look, I noticed that these evade fights had the Force of Will node in addition to the best defense. Both of these nodes mess with ability accuracy, and so Falcon had to stay on the bench. I couldn't justify bringing him if the two primary evasion fights locked him out. This was my first experience with realizing something that is Falcon's true weakness in the game. He doesn't actually have any abilities to counter any specific nodes. He can merely reduce the ability accuracy of the opponent's abilities. Most of the time, this means he can shut down a given defensive ability, but as with many things in Marvel Contest of Champions, well, things are a little complicated. So let's talk about Falcon's core mechanic, Locked On. The thing newer players may not know is Falcon had this same ability before his buff. In fact, when I was a new player in 2016, I ranked my 4-star Falcon, the second 4-star I ever pulled, to help me tackle some difficult lanes in Act 4 that would normally be assigned to OG Black Widow. I thanked my 4-star Falcon by swiftly using a 12.0 rank down ticket on his ass as soon as I could. Falcon, I'm sorry, man. I'm so sorry. Thanks for helping me through Act 4. It was extremely annoying using you to fight Electro, where 60% of the fight I couldn't actually hit you, but you got the job done. You did great, champ. The buff to Falcon made it easier to activate and maintain Locked On for the duration of the fight. It also drastically improved his damage output. The same problems from before in his original kit still exist on some level, as there are stretches of the fight where you may have to idle and be passive, waiting for your lockdown to come back, but overall, if you're willing to deal with that, he is a very powerful champion. But here is something interesting. Looking at Kabam's Champ Spotlight, the one that came out in November of 2020 with the updated kit, there are some very misleading things. First of all, strengths. It says anti-evade. Well, yes, sort of. Falcon has the ability to dash back and hold block for 1.2 seconds to activate locked on the opponent for plus or minus 14 seconds, and during this period the opponent suffers negative 100% defensive ability accuracy. Okay, so let's pause for 1 minute and talk about defensive ability accuracy. An ability in this game is something which will or will not occur during the course of a fight, either from the champion's own kit or the node. Abilities have inherent probability associated with them. In some champs kits, you might see something having a percentage next to it. Like, say, Archangel's heavy attack has a 50% chance per hit to inflict a bleed. Abilities that don't have a number listed next to them have a 100% chance to occur. For example, Apocalypse is heavy. Both hits inflict bleed is how it's described, meaning there is a 100% chance to occur. Ability accuracy modification comes into play when nodes or another champ's abilities interfere with this chance. For example, Domino has a probability field that reduces all of the champ's abilities by 15% at the start of the fight. This means anything that was at 100 is now at 85, and so on. There are some quote-unquote abilities like, say, Poison Immunity, which avoid ability accuracy. It's tough to say exactly what type of abilities are on this list, but for sure immunities are among them. So what is an offensive ability versus a defensive ability? Well, there is a classic understanding of this that went, a defensive ability is an ability that occurs when you are being hit, and an offensive ability is an ability that occurs when you are hitting. Thinking of it this way is a bit like using Isaac Newton's theory of gravity to describe occurrences on Earth. It is the general gist of what is going on, and when you approach it through this lens, it pretty much describes the world you live in. A Spider-Man character evades when you try to hit them, therefore that is a defensive ability. You hit the opponent and cause a bleed or a poison, therefore that is an offensive ability. But just like you need Einstein's theory of relativity to explain gravity in the solar system and in black holes, once we take a broader look at the MCOC universe, we need a better explanation of ability accuracy to get a sense of what is really happening. In June of 2021, DNA 3000, a prominent community member and contributor to the forums, wrote a post explaining what we were missing. According to the information he had gathered from game devs, there is no such thing as an offensive ability or a defensive ability. There is only ability accuracy. Defensive and offensive technically do the same thing. But as DNA 3000 said, the difference between them is not what they affect, but when they take effect. So essentially, defensive ability accuracy reduction occurs the moment or frame that a character is being hit. Offensive ability accuracy reduction occurs the moment or frame of the start of an attack. He illustrates this point with Magic's Limbo. If you are hitting her with Locked on Falcon and she goes over a bar of power, you can prevent Limbo from happening because the ability accuracy occurs at the frame of her being hit. However, if she returns a combo to you and goes over a bar of power, she can still proc Limbo. Essentially, a Limbo here is not a defensive or offensive ability, it is just an ability. The way you interact with it depends how it is categorized at that moment. I'll come back to this a little later, but knowing this, let's go back to the champ spotlight. Again, we see this text about anti-evade. Well, the truth is Falcon is not anti-evade. An anti-evade mechanic is anything like Cold Snap, True Strike, True Accuracy, Ghost Passive Precision, or Professor X's native evade countering abilities. All of these abilities don't have ability accuracy associated with them, but are instead a flat turning off of evade. Falcon's kit happens to reward you with stacks of cruelty passives when you do prevent an evade, but at the same time, it's important to realize that you can't specifically counter evade. You can only reduce the opponent's ability accuracy at the single frame of hitting them, which can stop an evade from happening. Below we see that the only weakness they point out is anti-crit, which is pretty funny because Falcon does have one major weakness and it ain't anti-crit. It's increased ability accuracy or inability to modify ability accuracy. This can stop Falcon in his tracks faster than a mystic can die to Human Torch in an arena fight. So what do these nodes or interactions look like in the game? Well, we only have to look at the Alliance War map to find 5 of these nodes. First of all, Force of Will. This makes the defender immune to ability accuracy reduction. This node appears twice on the war map, once on Path 5 and also on Node 25, which also has Footloose and Kinetic Transference. Then we have the Best Defense. This enhances auto block and evade chance on the defender by 60%, meaning you have a decent chance to get smacked or blocked in the face since your reduction is negative 40%. More subtle is Aspect of Evolution, which every time the opponent fills a bar of power, they gain 5% increase in certain stats, one of which is ability accuracy. So after 5 bars of power are filled, they are already 125%, which means your locked on is only 3/4 effective. We also have Rage, a node which punishes you for hitting too hard, which also is not able to be stopped with ability accuracy, and we have Steady Build-Up, Fury, and Unblockable. These nodes randomly have a sentence about plus 100% defensive ability accuracy, so fighting anyone there with Falcon, he will not be able to reduce anything. His locked on will just bring it from 200% to the baseline 100% for the character. Lastly, there are certain defenders like Mysterio and less so Old Man Logan and Archangel who cannot be ability reduced. Similarly, Longshot starts with 300% ability accuracy, and Sorcerer Supreme starts with as much as 150% based on her SIG. MODOK can go up to 115% ability accuracy at times, and this can cause an auto block to occur. If any of these defenders are placed on annoying nodes you want to turn off, like say Mixmaster or Hazard Shift, Falcon cannot be an option. Save MODOK, who you still have a decent chance to stop, but expect a few debuffs and auto blocks to slip through. But okay, point made. There are certain champs that shut down Falcon, and nodes as well. The same could be said about champs and nodes that counter Quake and Ghost. Well, actually very little can counter Ghost these days, so let's just leave that one alone. But yes, this may be true, but the issue is there are sometimes some annoying knock-on effects when your main weapon is ability accuracy. For this, we actually go back to the opening clip of this video during my 7.3 stream. During this clip, we have a node where I need to be inflicting incinerates to do any damage. Kabam used to design nodes like this all the time to really make you consider rank ups. As in, I really need a champ that can create incinerate to tackle this node. I should rank Sunspot, for example. But since the end of Act 6 and its subsequent nerf and the release of Act 7, Kabam has started to make more inclusive nodes to get you to use a variety of champs to get the job done. One of these examples is the Got a Light node, a node which gives any champ you bring a 20% chance per hit, so roughly once per combo, to inflict an incinerate, making anyone technically usable for the node, when coupled with Pleasure to Burn. But what we see here is something DNA 3000 later explains in his posts. When Falcon applies Locked On, he is applying an ability accuracy debuff, he calls it. Even though there's not a physical debuff associated with it, let's just consider it a debuff for now. Because it is a defensive ability accuracy debuff, it flickers off and on depending on whether the defender is being struck at that instant or not. Later he theorizes, this means that offensive and defensive ability accuracy reduction work, in a sense, by coincidence. Since most abilities Kabam wants to work defensively are triggered upon being hit, they will trigger at the exact moment of a hit and thus be affected by defensive ability accuracy reduction. However, anything else that triggers at the same time will also be affected by DAAR, even if it is something we don't normally consider to be a defensive ability. So, in the case of Got a Light, this is actually an ability on the opponent because it is a node on the opponent. Even though it seems that it should affect the attacker, the node actually places an Incinerate on the defender with a 20% chance. So if Locked On is activated, we can assure that this has a negative 80% chance to occur every time we hit the opponent because, as DNA stated, there are no defensive abilities, only abilities that occur on the frame of the opponent's getting hit. This is one of the infuriating consequences of using ability accuracy modification in this game. There are several other examples of nodes that do beneficial things for the player that are essentially shut off by ability accuracy that range beyond even Falcon. This was very noticeable when Cav EQ was released. If you were running points in Pacify or Assassin Mastery, many of the beneficial effects like passive furies granted from the new class nodes revolved around things that happen when you hit the opponent. So Falcon or these masteries would often prevent that from happening. Same could be said when fighting as Magneto against Metal. A prime example of a node where you can get totally screwed on is Flux Dispersal, which reduces damage on the opponent every time you hit them, but you can use a heavy attack to cancel out the flux charges, granting you full damage again. Well, I would not recommend a Falcon heavy attack to remove these charges because it will register as a defensive ability and you won't be able to remove them. In addition to Got a Light, we have the counterpart nodes like Live Wires and Toxicant, which do the same thing for shock and poison, respectively. All of these nodes appear in Act 7, and Falcon, and often Magneto as well, since I already brought him up, don't work at all for these nodes, which require you to inflict specific debuffs that the node allows you to inflict, but you end up stopping. DLL, my friend, has even reported to me that sometimes Pacify will stop Reed's Special 2 from applying debuffs on the opponent, which to me is absolutely absurd. So, before I go too long here, let's draw some conclusions. Falcon is indeed a powerful champ. His playstyle may not be for everyone, but you can't deny his ability to turn off annoying abilities in certain situations. Anything from evade to thorns to miss, auto block, things rock stacks, and beyond is quite powerful. However, it's also important to admit that there are factors in the game, several war nodes and other nodes present in the entire game, that can render him useless. And before you go into a quest blindly thinking that you have a perfect evade counter, you need to know that Falcon is an ability reducer, and if you want a proper evade counter in this situation, if there's some kind of fluctuating ability accuracy, for example, you may want to lean on Professor X, Killmonger, Moleman, Ghost, or one of the other ones that directly shuts off evade. That being said, just like True Strike for Quake and Armor Break for Ghost, Falcon does have his Achilles heel in the means of Force of Will or similar nodes. Otherwise, he is a very powerful champion. But what I do think needs to be understood is that there are also beneficial abilities to you, the attacker, that are sometimes lumped into the abilities of the opponent that can unintentionally be turned off by Falcon's Locked On, as well as the Pacify and Assassin masteries. To me, I encourage you all to be aware that these exist and to make team planning decisions around them. But I also think it needs to be on Kabam's radar to try to transfer these abilities off the opponent and onto the attacker so we don't have to worry about this as much. Being forced to change masteries or lock out otherwise useful champs is not fun. And at the same time, I'm not even sure the Kabam overlords are aware of this problem based on Falcon's Spotlight, which completely forgets to mention Force of Will as one of his weaknesses. If they couldn't even think of that over there, I have very little faith that they are thinking about his interactions with got a light and other beneficial nodes. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.